Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, this morning's surge in the NASDAQ futures follows an earnings blowout from Nvidia. That stock is up another 8% this morning. The chipmaker's results and outlook beat estimates thanks to a surge in demand for artificial intelligence processors. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has more from San Francisco.
There is staying power for Nvidia's AI story. The guidance for the fiscal third quarter is sales of $16 billion, plus or minus 2%. That's about 29% above what analysts were expecting. And the way that executives on the call described it is they have visibility on AI demand going into the next fiscal year. CFO Colette Kress called it, quote, tremendous and broad-based AI demand. Ed Ludlow for Bloomberg News in San Francisco.
All right, Ed, thanks. Well, Nvidia's stock is now up more than 225% on the year. Despite the gain, Dan Morgan at Synovius Trust says the valuation is not that crazy.
I think if you look at the stock as on a forward multiple basis and you factor in the tremendous year-over-year growth that they're getting right now and the momentum that they're getting on this quarter-to-quarter basis, the stock to me doesn't seem that excessive.
And Dan Morgan at Synovius Trust says Nvidia will give a big boost to the NASDAQ. The index was on track for its worst month of the year before yesterday's results.
Well, the earnings blowout's not only making Nvidia investors happy this morning, Karen, it's also boosting the wealth of CEO Jensen Huang. His fortune grew as much as $4.2 billion, bringing his net worth now to around $46 billion. If that gain is sustained, Huang would end up among the world's 25 wealthiest people.
While investors react to Nvidia earnings, there's another potential market event going on in Wyoming. Economists are gathering in Jackson Hole in preparation for remarks from Fed Chair Jay Powell and European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde. Bloomberg's Tom Keene is in Wyoming and leads our team coverage.
Karen and Nathan, I think it's going to be interesting. On a Thursday, we look to Friday, yes, Chairman Powell's speech, but far more importantly and underplayed in the American media is Christine Lagarde's speech, which follows oftentimes on a Saturday, but I think because of schedule, the president of the European Central Bank speaking in the early afternoon of Wyoming Friday. It's going to be interesting to see what Lagarde says with the real difficulties in the European economy, how that redounds over to the United States.
All right, Tom, thanks. And tune in for our comprehensive live coverage from Jackson Hole. The main event gets underway tomorrow with a special 4-hour edition of Bloomberg Surveillance starting at 8 a.m. Eastern. And in the afternoon, Tom sits down for an exclusive interview with ECB President Christine Lagarde. Catch that conversation at the close of U.S. markets at 4 p.m.
Lots to look forward to, Karen. But let's shift to politics now. And the major story today coming out of Milwaukee. 8 Republican candidates squared off in the first debate of the presidential race. Former President Donald Trump wasn't at the event hosted by Fox News, so the remaining contenders trained their fire mostly on President Biden and his policies. Here's South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Joe Biden's Bidenomics has led to the loss of $10,000 of spending power for the average family.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis got some applause when he was asked whether he'd keep supporting Ukraine.
I'm not going to send troops to Ukraine, but I am going to send them to our southern border. When these drug pushers are bringing fentanyl across the border, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to use force, and we're going to leave them stone cold dead.
But entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy was a frequent target of attacks on stage. He put forward economic policies of his own.
Unlock American energy, drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Put people back to work by no longer paying them more to stay at home. Reform the U.S. Fed, stabilize the U.S. dollar, and go to war. The only war that I will declare as U.S. president will be the war on the federal administrative state.
Now, all the candidates were asked whether they would support Trump as the nominee if he were convicted of a felony. Most raised their hands, except former governors Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson.
Nathan, while the debate aired on Fox News, Trump was on social media. The former president took part in a pre-recorded interview with Tucker Carlson on X and explained why he wasn't at the debate.
If you're leading by 50, 60, I have one poll, I'm leading by 70 points, and I'm saying, why am I doing it? And I'm going to have 8 people, 10 people, whoever made the debate. I don't know how many it is, but I'm going to have all these people screaming at me, shouting questions at me, all of which I love answering, I love doing, but it doesn't make sense to do.
And later today, Trump is set to surrender to authorities in Georgia on charges that he schemed to overturn the 2020 election.
The other major story we're following comes out of Russia. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the man who led a mutiny that posed the biggest threat to President Vladimir Putin, is presumed dead. We get more from Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo.
The fact that there aren't details yet that has prompted a lot of speculation, frankly, on Russian Telegram channels, some suggesting that perhaps there is the hand of the Kremlin behind this. Remember, it's almost 2 months to the date that he led this insurrection against Moscow. That was a serious threat to the authority of Vladimir Putin. And it's not really shocking either that a lot of the critics and opponents of Vladimir Putin do have a history and a track record of finding themselves in situations where they were either seriously injured or dead.
And Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo says Prigozhin is presumed dead at the age of 62.
It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Amy Morris. Amy, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The House Freedom Caucus continues to raise the risk of an October 1st government shutdown with demands for spending cuts and conditions on money for Ukraine in exchange for their support of stopgap spending legislation. Now, these demands will likely face strong Democratic opposition and threaten to sink a so-called continuing resolution that leaders in both parties have said is necessary to avoid a partial shutdown after the fiscal year ends September 30th. And House Republicans may be ready to launch an investigation into the federal response into the Maui wildfires. Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he's concerned about the response and questioned why there were so many deaths. Now there are more questions about what the mayor knew when those fires were spreading. The state attorney general's office in Hawaii is investigating, telling CBS they're, quote, advising state actors to refrain from commenting on a pending investigation. At the same time, Hawaiian officials are asking the people of Maui who are missing loved ones to come forward and submit some DNA so the remains that have been found can be identified. Julie French is an expert in DNA identification and the senior vice president of Andy Corporation. She says so far only 104 samples have been submitted.
We need family members to come forward and donate their samples so that we can compare them to these DNA profiles we've already generated from remains.
At least 115 people were killed in the wildfires. Hundreds of others are still unaccounted for. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, detained in Russia on espionage charges, will remain in custody at least until November 30th. Gershkovich and his employer deny those allegations, and the U.S. government has declared him to be wrongfully detained. Japan has started the release of treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear site into the Pacific Ocean. It's a process that could last about 30 years, and it's triggered an immediate retaliation by China to curb seafood imports. Japan's process has been authorized as safe by the International Atomic Energy Agency, but China and other opponents insist that the release of wastewater from a disaster site cannot compare with similar activities that are commonplace in the global nuclear sector. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Amy, thank you. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with Dan Schwartzman. Dan.
Good morning, Karen. Let's start out in Major League Baseball, where the Yankees snapped their 9-game losing streak. That's courtesy of the Yes Network. Yankees beat the Nationals 9-1 as Aaron Judge hits 3 home runs and drives in 6 runs. Meanwhile, the Mets lose a rubber game of their 3-game set in Atlanta 7-0. Red Sox knock off the Astros in Houston 7-5 in 10 innings. Orioles get past the Blue Jays 7-0. Giants knocking off the Phillies in 10 innings 8-6. A's getting shut out at home 4-0 by the Royals, while the Mariners' 8-game winning streak is snapped as Seattle loses in Chicago 5-4 in 10 innings to the White Sox. LA Angels 2A star Shohei Ohtani will not pitch the rest of the season after being diagnosed with the torn right elbow ligament. No decision has been made yet regarding surgery. The frontrunner for AL MVP had Tommy John surgery just 5 years ago. Indianapolis Colts giving disgruntled running back Jonathan Taylor till Tuesday to find a trade partner. Sources say the Colts are looking to get either a first-round draft pick for Taylor or a package of picks worth similar value. Sources confirming that the 49ers have decided to go with Sam Darnold as a backup quarterback to Brock Purdy, putting in doubt the future of former 2021 number 3 overall draft pick Trey Lance. The NFL Network is reporting that the Niners are exploring all options for Lance, which include keeping the 23-year-old as a third stringer or either leasing or trading the North Dakota State product. That's your Bloomberg Sports Update. I'm Dan Schwartzman. Karen.
All right, Dan, thank you. Well, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak, we're going to take a closer look at Nvidia earnings with Dan Ives, the managing director and senior analyst at Wedbush Securities. And we'll also have the very latest on the GOP debate in Milwaukee. We'll be speaking with Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Investors have been waiting all week to hear earnings from Nvidia, and the chip maker behind the most advanced artificial intelligence semiconductors more than delivered, with revenue that doubled to $13.5 billion in the latest quarter, an outlook that is 28% above Wall Street estimates. This is a third straight blowout quarter for the company that has really been behind much of the fuel of this year's rally in tech stocks. So can Nvidia continue to deliver on these mega bullish expectations? Let's bring in a mega bull on the tech sector for some analysis of Nvidia's results. Dan Ives is with us now, managing director and senior analyst at Wedbush Securities. So Dan, a third straight blowout outlook. How do you rate this upgrade for Nvidia?
I mean, this is the Godfather of AI, and they delivered in home run fashion. I think this was a quarter in guidance for the ages. This is almost historical in terms of what it means for the rest of the tech sector with the world watching. This is unparalleled demand that we have not seen since the internet in 1995. In my opinion, it speaks to what I believe is now the start of a new tech bull market.
Now, we did hear from the CEO, Jensen Huang, on the call saying that they can keep production up with that supply. Do you see any potential headwinds for Nvidia being able to maintain the kind of production that it says that it can deliver?
Look, I see for Jensen and Nvidia right now, they are on the yellow brick road to success. They're the only game in town at a transformational trend that we haven't seen in 30 years. So when you look at what everyone's focused on, does demand continue to be there? Are use cases growing? You heard from Nvidia, and that just speaks to now what we're going to see from Microsoft, Google, MongoDB, the rest of software and chips that's now coming down the road in 2024. That's what the street's focused on, despite noise that we'll hear out of Jackson Hole from a Fed talking tough.
Yeah, I do want to get to the rate picture, what that could mean for Nvidia's valuation. I mean, we've seen this stock go up more than 200% this year. How do you see the valuation? Can it continue to trade at these kind of record levels, particularly when we are expecting to see higher for longer rates from the Federal Reserve?
A great question. I mean, my view is transformational growth stories the last 20 years, the Netflix, the Microsofts, the Apples, the Amazon. You can't just put them in a box, PE, what are they trading at next year? Nvidia now, when you look out 3-5 years, I believe it's just starting in terms of what this $1 trillion growth opportunity incrementally could be, which is why we're bullish in terms of the story. And I think what this means for the rest of the sector in what I view as a 1995 moment, star of the internet.
He also mentioned, Jensen Huang did, the potential of China, the crackdown on artificial intelligence access for China, and what that could mean for Nvidia's business. Could that erode some of the outlook that we're hearing from Nvidia?
Look, I think the bark was worse than the bite. I think even when we saw the Biden restrictions a lot less onerous than anyone was, fearing. And that's important because at the end of the day right now, this is not the time for the cold tech war to continue in terms of when it comes to AI ratcheting up. And I think what we're seeing here is that this is not really going to spoil the party. And I think that's the important thing in terms of broader, not just NVIDIA, but the rest of the tech sector. And that's the one thing that's so important here. After a tech sell-off, it was all focused on NVIDIA. This was guidance heard around the world. And the bulls right now, I mean, there are smiles on their faces, and the bears are going back into hibernation mode into their caves.
Well, where do you see breadth coming in the AI space? Obviously, Nvidia has been so dominant this year. Where are the other players for you?
Well, I think that's the focus, the second, third, fourth derivative. You look directly, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, the cloud players, Oracle. I think IBM benefits as well. And then you look at the rest of the software, MongoDB, Snowflake, Palantir, C3 AI, I think Salesforce.com. I mean, this is going to be a 3 to 5 year tidal wave of growth that we have not seen really in 30 years. And it's software and chips. Then you look at consumer, look at names like Meta. Look at how they're going to benefit. So I think this is really just unprecedented, a jaw dropper, a stunner in terms of guidance.
In terms of the growth, Dan, we got about a minute left here. Nvidia also announced a $25 billion stock buyback. Why do a buyback when there is potential for more growth in AI?
Yeah, I think that's something from the board, and I think strategically capital allocation, and that's a smart move because this company right now is going to start making more cash in some countries. They need to make sure they could do some M&A down the road, but they find themselves now in just a massive position of strength. And I think they've really now started to become the only game in town. They built the castle. Everyone's coming. They need to use that cash accordingly.
Always great to get your thoughts, as always, Dan. Thanks so much for being with us. That's Dan Ives, Managing Director, Senior Analyst at Wedbush Securities, on the blowout earnings that we heard from Nvidia after the close of trading yesterday. We want to turn now from big tech to big politics. We did have the first debate of the 2024 presidential campaign last night, hosted by Fox News in Milwaukee. It was a battle for second place. Of course, the runaway frontrunner in this race, Donald Trump, sat it out. So did this first debate change the trajectory as we get closer to the first primaries and caucuses in the 2024 campaign? Let's bring in Terry Haynes for some analysis of this first debate. Terry is the founder of Pangea Policy. Terry, I think a lot of expectation going in was there was going to be a focus on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to try to cement the campaign reset after the sort of faltering start that he's had here. Did he do himself any favors last night?
I have DeSantis as kind of one of my meh candidates. Frankly, that's a scientific term, as everyone knows.
I can tell.
I think DeSantis didn't hurt himself, but he got stronger as the night went on. There's a lot of candidates on the stage. It made it hard for him to break out, but I think he did get better. Ultimately, he probably arrested the bleeding. There's no reason for somebody that supports DeSantis now to leave him. There's not a lot of call for rushing to DeSantis either. But I thought he did all right.
Did anyone have a breakout moment for you?
I had the best. To me, I thought the winner in the debate really was Nikki Haley. She differentiated herself on a lot of different issues. Interestingly, and kind of a breakout rhetorical move, she called out Republicans, including some of them on the stage, for contributing and enabling runaway U.S. debt and fiscal spending. And that's a bit of a novel gambit, criticizing your own side as contributing to the problem. But, it has the added advantage of being true, as Henry Kissinger once said. And is a real good way for Haley to set herself apart from the pack. She was in every debate and landed a lot of punches, I thought.
A lot of the spin following the debate was the attention that seemed to be focused on Vivek Ramaswamy, the newcomer, of course, in this race. And he seemed to hold his own in terms of keeping really tight sound bites and pretty forceful answers to a lot of the questions. What did you think of Ramaswamy's performance?
I think he came perilously close to jumping the shark, Nathan. It was fascinating to watch because it seemed like all the other professional politicians came in with one thought, that this amateur is doing better than we think he should be. So, let's take him down a notch. I think they did to some extent, and I think he helped a little bit. He was a little overamped, and he got tagged by the field as, I think one candidate called him the childish amateur on the stage, and I think that's likely to stick to some extent. He makes some points, but he's also an outlier on a lot of different issues, including Ukraine aid, where everybody else was very supportive of Ukraine aid. And I think that's an important takeaway from this field. But fundamentally, I thought he was a little abrasive, and in an introductory debate where demeanor is very important, I thought he came off too hot.
In our last minute here, Terry, you've noted in the past that there's a sizable majority of Republican voters who are, I guess, anti-Trump in some respects, that Trump, in not all of the polls, has a majority of support from Republican voters. Did this debate do enough to coalesce some of that non-Trump support around one candidate?
It did not, but I think it earned a lot of candidates a second look. And when you're looking at, say, Iowa early on, where Trump has, around 4 out of 10 likely primary voters, that already means that 6 out of 10 are looking at or for someone else. And this debate without Trump, where the candidates had a chance to debate and elbow each other and shine a little bit, gave, I think, a lot of them the opportunity for a second look from voters.
And just quickly, of course, the other big story is the presumed death of Yevgeny Prigozhin in that plane crash in Russia. What impact does that potentially have on Russian President Putin?
Well, they'll take it two ways quickly. One is for markets. I think there's obviously an increase in geopolitical risk with a likely impact on oil prices and a likely impact on grain prices as well. For Putin, everybody thought that he was starting to look weak, so dispatching Prigozhin may make him look stronger. But what you've got in Russia is kind of worse than the strong or the weak. What it is frankly, you don't know. You don't know exactly who's in control. You don't know exactly what factions are battling successfully. You don't know exactly how long Putin's going to be around, and that's really a big problem geopolitically.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.